So, assalamu alaikum, greetings of peace. Thank you all for being here on a Saturday morning. For those of you that are tuning in, thank you for being awake and at your computers, which is generally the first thing I do when I wake up on a Saturday morning. Thank you to Dr. Hatem and to Center for Race and Gender Studies and everyone else that made this conference possible. I'm talking today about the war on drugs and the war on terror and the connections between the two. And I wanted to start actually with sort of my own personal awakening on the connections between the two, because I think for me that really talks about the casework that we're doing at CAIR. I grew up in a household where we didn't do drugs. We didn't talk about drugs. It was just understood that nobody did them. I was telling my husband on the way over here that I participated in the DARE program in middle school, which taught me that drugs were bad for my brain, and I should never ever use them. I should only take the ones that the folks in the white coats told me I could take through prescriptions. But everything else was illegal and would ruin my life, would kill my brain cells. Not only did I participate in it in middle school, in high school, I went back to middle school as a DARE program representative with, you know, a police car and all of that fun jazz. And I told other little kids that they shouldn't do drugs either because I hadn't and my life had turned out amazing. This informed my understanding of the criminal justice system. People who went to jail were bad. I didn't want to be a bad person, and so I wasn't going to go to jail, and I wasn't going to buy drugs off the streets, and I didn't want to endanger my life, and you know that thing about killing brain cells again. But I would take whatever the doctor gave me. And this sounds simplistic, but this really is the understanding that I think a lot of children within the MEMSA communities grow up with. Drugs are bad, people who do bad things go to jail. We don't want to be like them. No questions about, you know, the racial disparities in the application of the war on drugs, no questions about the integrity of convictions. If someone is convicted by a jury of their peers, that means they must have done it. And they deserve what they are going to get. No conversation about what police were doing in black and brown communities, because as a Pakistani immigrant family, we just wanted to integrate. We just wanted to do well for ourselves. We wanted to make sure both my brother and I went to college, did well, got jobs that paid well, and then I ended up at a nonprofit, but that's a whole other story. And so that was our understanding of the war on drugs. This was a legitimate thing, drugs were bad for our communities. As I went through college and my politics became a lot more radically left, I started to question the way law enforcement was interacting with our communities. But I didn't really see it because it wasn't impacting my family. No one in my family was even talking about medical marijuana. This is a conversation we didn't have in our family until 2011 when we started to talk about cancer and the realities of cancer and what we would do if someone really needed medical marijuana in our family. But in 2010, a young man walked into our office, Yasser Afifi. He was surprised and shocked and confused. He had taken his car in to the mechanics for an oil change, and he happened to look under his car, which I never do. Gosh, I barely take my car into the mechanic, but when I do, I don't look under it. I just hope that the entire wheel goes really quickly. He looked under it, and he found a black box that he did not recognize. Him, the mechanic, and a friend sort of all looked at it and thought, what's that? It doesn't belong there. It was two pieces. There was one was a box about this big, and then the other one was a battery pack about this big. And they were attached to the rear driver's side, the rear undercarriage driver's side of the car. So it was attached via magnets. They took it off the car. They unplugged whatever they thought they could unplug, and they thought, this is really strange. They went home, they took pictures of it, they posted it online. Not Facebook or Twitter, but instead Reddit, probably where all the other tech geeks hang out. And within about 24 hours, had figured out that it was a GPS tracking device. Through the serial number and various, and whatever little information was on the tracking device, they realized that it was sold by a company called Cobham. And Cobham does business exclusively with law enforcement and the military. So the first post on Sunday reads to the effect of, what is this, right? And then there's actually all of this conversation and commentary by people about what it might be, and they figure out. And so Monday, it's like, does this mean the FBI is after me? And that's what the post says. And it jumps to the front page of Reddit, and it goes viral all over the world. So on Monday, so it happened on a Sunday, on Monday I actually read about it through an Australian website, and I thought, oh gosh, like, poor person, like, whoever this happened to. Not realizing it was an Arab American college student who lived down the street from our CAIR office in Santa Clara. So, you know, does this mean the FBI is after me? And then there's all this conversation about, should we sell it on Craigslist? I think the highest bid they got was like $600. Turns out it's worth more than that. You know, should we stick it on a cop car? Should we drop it in a lake? What should we do with it? Well, the FBI starts to read these posts, right? And we find this out later through the Freedom of Information Act. And on Tuesday, they show up outside of his house. And they pulled him, so he sees a couple of suspicious-looking people. I like using the word suspicious to describe law enforcement because I think it's important to control the terminology. We're not suspicious, they are. So they're hanging out outside of his car, and they ask him about his expired tags, and there's this conversation that ensues. He thinks nothing of it. He gets in his car, and as he starts to exit his apartment complex, he's pulled over by several law enforcement vehicles, right? He stops, he rolls down his window, and a law enforcement officer, to this day, who we have not identified, but who we suspect is a local police officer, approaches him and asks him about his expired tags. Asks him to exit his vehicle based on his expired tags. Anyone who's ever gotten an expired tags ticket knows it's just a fix-it ticket. You're not going to be asked to exit your car. The police officer has him come out of his car. He does. He complies. What would you do if someone with a gun and a badge told you to do something? You would do it. And then flags over a couple of FBI agents, the same people who had been standing by his car earlier. And the conversation that ensues is something to the effect of, and I'm paraphrasing in case the FBI is watching online, is something to the effect of, where were you on Sunday? Did you find a device on your car? We need it back. It's ours. It's really expensive. Yes, they said it's really expensive. It's so embarrassing for the FBI to have had agents who were so reckless with their words. But that's what they said. He asks them, is it yours? Did you place it on my car? They admit both. And then he says, well, why should I give it back to you? And essentially they say, if you don't, we're going to make things very difficult for you. 20-year-old college student, I would comply. Like, I'm a lawyer, and I would not call them on their bluff. And so, though I would advise all of you to call them on their bluff, but different presentation. We can talk about the politics of fear. But so he walks back to his apartment. He's smart. He doesn't let them into his apartment. They wait outside. He retrieves a tracking device, and what ensues is what they would call voluntary conversation and what I would call an interrogation about everything from which community leaders he knows to where his international trips are, what restaurants he goes to with his girlfriend, things that there are no way they could have found out just from observing from a distance, but rather from following him for days, if not weeks. He returns a tracking device to him, and at the end of the conversation they say, this is really boring, or you're a lot more boring than we expected, we're done with you. And one, he's kind of insulted that they called him boring. I mean, wouldn't you be? And then he's sort of thinking to himself, what do I do? This is on Tuesday, this is the first or second Tuesday in October of 2010. On Wednesday, he walks into our office and he says, so this is what happened. And it sounds so incredible. Like, it sounds like something that you see on television, not something that actually happens in the community. And I think in terms of processing my own reaction, at that time, am not making the connection that this is a reality for so many communities. Why is it unrealistic that this would happen in our own community? We're able to confirm the story because the mechanic is one that serves the Muslim community regularly in Santa Clara, and since then he's gotten dozens of requests for people to check for GPS tracking devices. I should tell you right now that they've mostly been turned off, and they all look very different. So even if you looked in the same place Yasser looked, you wouldn't find one, and that wouldn't tell you anything about whether or not there was actually one there. So we verified that this mechanic can confirm the story. The agent who had visited him, one of the agents, is a woman who makes regular visits in the Muslim community and had been seen speaking to other Arab Americans asking about local Muslim restaurants. So we're also able to confirm that the agent wasn't a fake agent. And so the question is, what do we do? And in October of 2010, at CAIR, we start to draw the very important and explicit connections between the war on drugs and the war on terror.